Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz saxophonist, composer, bandleader, and educator Stephen Philip Harvey. We caught up with him to talk about his new 2024 CD called Elemental. It's live. And we also talked to him about his life in music and what is in store. He leads various ensembles with the drive to explore a vast array of avenues in improvisation and composition. We cover all of the angles. Enjoy.
Well, it's nice to meet you, man. Thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely no problem. It's my planning during my teaching day, so I have more than a minute. It's great.
Okay, right on. Well, before we get into the brand new album, your latest, the live one, I want to know, we look at the calendar 4 years ago in April, we were coming to grips with this pandemic, and it really did a lot to the musicians of the world. I'm curious, how did you survive that time period, and how did it change you?
So there was that was about right when I was getting really, really serious about my big band writing and making goals to, okay, by the end of 2020 or by this time in 2020, I want to have my entire book done for this recording, and then try and record that year and like kind of launch off. And then the pandemic hit, and it was like really dark. I'm a public school teacher during the day, so it didn't affect me financially the way it affected a lot of my colleagues who are professional freelance musicians all the time. So fortunately, I didn't have to deal with that aspect of it, but it kind of put me in this dark-ish place on music and on performing for a while, to the point where I had to really revisit my motives for it in the fall of that year. So by the time the fall rolled around, I had to kind of revisit the impetus behind recording and really set out to make a goal of what was happening. So in 2021, when it seemed like things started to look brighter, vaccines were coming out, science was catching up to the pandemic, and I was like, okay, well, I can't sit here with my hands tied and say that I'm powerless to the situation. So I made some 5-year goals, and we're in year 4. We're in the beginning of year 4 of that 5-year goal plan. Of actually writing and recording. A lot of this music came out of 2021, where we were still kind of stuck at home a lot, and I was writing a whole bunch of music until then. So unfortunately, I was dark for a while after the pandemic started, but fortunately, by the time the pandemic was rearing its head to a more sense of a normalcy, I was motivated to get some stuff done.
So Elemental is the latest album, and it's a live album. And I think the thing during that time period was that everyone kind of listened to live music and some level of nostalgia because it went away. So was there a particular focus on making sure you got a live album out as a part of all this material you were putting together?
No, so it was on my 5-year goal list. I've always wanted to do a live album. I always feel like when especially after recording in the first Elemental, the studio version, and recording Smash, my big band album, that there is something kind of lost in the take studio vibe, where in a live setting, you're just there for interaction. There's interplay. You can hear people wooing. It's always been a goal of mine. And when I knew that I was setting out with the octet for our tour, I tried to look for places that we could just do a live album at the end of the tour, and that's what happened with this. So the 2 albums that came out of that live recording weren't necessarily a master plan type of thing, but a happenstance by the fact that we were able to. So their Radio Artifact existed in Cincinnati. It routed well, and I was like, all right, let's do it.
So talk to me a little bit about what you hope the listener gets from this album.
So the Elemental Live specifically, I'm hoping that they get a different take on the 2023 tracks. So I'm really glad that I have these studio and live versions, because you have a completely different feel from both of them. One's a little bit more pristine, and we have our second, third takes of things, and the other one has a lot more interaction, a lot more takes that I wouldn't necessarily have been yeah, let's keep that on that album, but are more authentic to what would be happening live, if that makes sense. I really like programmatic music, or music that has some extra musical idea attached to it. So with the Elemental Suite, I really hope that people can hear like my voice representing these classical elements that a lot of people have taken into media, into storytelling, and used as some sort of entertainment.
So talk to me a little bit about this journey into the music. Where were you born and raised, and how did you not only get into music, but more specifically, how did jazz become a focus?
Oh man, that's like a kind of long, but also like super sporadic type of thing. So I grew up in a musical family, but not in this sort of musical family. It was more so like a gospel church musical family. So we all sing. My wife, who's a music teacher, we met in music school, she's not as frustrated anymore, but used to be very frustrated when she would come to a family event and then we'd break out in 4-part harmony, and that wasn't necessarily something that she was like super adept at, but like that's what I lived my life as. Like diatonic harmonization was always a thing in my ear because you'd sing a hymn and you have to grab a part, so you'd sing it. Like performing music has always been a thing since a very, very young age, especially in the church. And then when like music demos became a thing, I had no intention in 3rd grade to play an instrument in 4th grade. But when they showed us the instruments, I was like, oh, it's kind of cool. Let's go ask my mom what she played. She was like, I played clarinet. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went and picked up the clarinet, and I ended up falling in love with it, playing it throughout elementary all the way through high school. Picked up the saxophone towards the end of high school, like junior sophomore year, because our jazz band, like their tenors graduated, and our director was like, hey, I need a tenor. So it was like a happenstance. It was an accident that I started playing the saxophone. And then when I got into music school, I knew that I wanted to either teach band or teach choir, but like my quote dream when I was a freshman wasn't to be like a jazz saxophonist or a composer. I had no like ear for the amount of jazz music that I listen to today. I didn't know who figureheads were. In my mind, vocal jazz was like, I could name people from that, but like very few, and not necessarily like a wide breadth of timelines either. So like my one professor who heard me noodle on the clarinet a lot, I like to just make up melodies and stuff. So I was always literally composing, but not thinking that I was composing. Started yelling like clarinet improviser names at me while we were at marching band once. And I looked them up and I was like, oh, these guys are like improvising on the clarinet. That's really cool. I've never really thought of that as an option. And eventually I like joined our jazz combo at my undergrad. Then I started writing tunes for that jazz combo, learning how to improvise and learning how to write tunes to improvise over. And by that like middle of my junior year, end of my junior year, I was like, I'm way more interested in this than I am teaching full time. And I do teach full time, but like my passion lies in the creation and the performance of music now. So my real jazz education came in grad school, where I just like had a lot of catching up to do, and the staff at YSU, the faculty at YSU, like did a really great job of making sure I did that catch up. And then since then, it's just been a steady stream of like practice, listening, networking, going to conference, and like trying to find as many people to learn from as possible.
What was the first live jazz show that you saw with your own eyes that blew you away?
Oh, so there are a couple that can count for that where I was just like, whoa. So when it comes to big band writing, the first live jazz show that I saw where I was like, I want to do that. Like, I knew I wanted to arrange for big band already, but I'd never really thought of contemporary original composition as like a big thing to do. Was I went and saw Sam Blakesley's large group, is what he calls his large ensemble. Sam Blakesley's large group at Blue Jazz in Akron, Ohio. It was like an hour away from where I was going to school. I was like, oh yeah, sure, let's go see this big band show. And I was just like, this is exactly the type of music that I want to write. It sounded just so fresh and so contemporary. And when it came to playing saxophone, there were tons of saxophonists, like historically, who I liked, like Joe Henderson, like Coltrane, like Dexter Gordon. But then the first live person was this master class with Chris Potter. Oh my God. When I heard him live, at Blue Jazz in Akron, so a lot of my formative experiences were at Blue Jazz in Akron. When I heard him live for the first time, it was mind-blowing. There's this famous video of him playing Cherokee in 10 of the 12 keys. It was supposed to be all 12 keys, but he was like, I guess I skipped some. He's just playing Cherokee a cappella, and I was sitting there with my jaw to the floor, like a seat 10 feet away from him. So I had already liked his compositions for this one album that he released earlier in the year called Imaginary Cities. And that's why I went to the master class. Like, I knew he was a phenomenal saxophonist, but I heard him in an ensemble format. And to hear an unaccompanied saxophone and then to hear a trio, like a cordless trio like that, I was blown away. So those two were really like my first big, like, my gosh, this is exactly what I want to do.
So what do you like the best about being a professional musician? What gets you out of bed? What motivates you? And what do you look forward to?
I look forward to shows. Like, the writing portion is always interesting. It's a fun challenge, and it's a fun, like, brain exercise, a musical exercise, like an ear exercise and everything. But I look forward to when it gets to be played for other people and other people get to enjoy it. One of my favorite things is, like, after a show, when people are like, this is what I liked specifically, not mainly for like a self-inflation of the ego type of thing, but to know that, like, when I'm putting on a show with my friends, that there's something different for each person to latch on to. Usually with a performance, like, if I'm playing a performance of like 10 tunes in a set and it's like a 90-minute performance, I can get 10 different people saying 10 different things that they liked. And it's just like the eclecticism of jazz music, where it's not this one set thing over and over. Like, I can put on an album by a band, and there's no hate towards like regular popular music, but for the most part, that album might sound the same front to back in style and delivery. It's just different words and slightly different chords. But like with jazz, quote, the umbrella, it's like touching all these different things. You can even take that popular music and play it in a jazz style. It's just like so eclectic, and that's how I feel like I live my musical life.
So of all of these shows that you've been to and all the stages that you've been on, you're in a position to educate the next generation. What is it that you really want them to learn? What do you try to impart on them?
I feel like when people hear the phrase jazz, or when people like just think about instrumental music in general, that they think back then, that it's a very like antiquated thought for them. And my impetus for like education with jazz and then other just types of music in general is to make sure that people know that there's like fresh, new music being written, being performed, that they could be interested in, that's influenced by the music that they are interested in, or influenced by music that they could be interested in if they were exposed to it. And that eclecticism musically is something that we should be proud of, that we should like encourage for our students. I know in like a general music classroom, that's the whole goal, is for them to have an appreciation of a broad sense of music. And I feel like as a performing educator, it's important that we represent that in our musical styles and like bring a generation of students or a generation of listeners, they don't even have to be performers, that have the same sort of like appreciation for multiple different sounds in the same space.
So why do you love jazz?
That's the freedom of what it can be. If someone says like pop punk music, I was really into pop punk when I was in middle school and early high school. When people say that type of music, there's a set image that it's supposed to be. There's a set sound, a set tempo, a set like overdrive on your guitars that's supposed to happen. And if you're not doing it, some people are going to say that's not pop punk, that's something else. But with like jazz as a umbrella term, it encompasses so many different things that can exist. You can have like hip hop influenced jazz, you can have classically influenced jazz, you can have Irish folk influenced jazz. What's that dude's name? Bertie McCready? I can't remember his name. Ferguson McCready? There's just so much that I feel like can be represented in it, even intrinsically. There's so much of myself when I'm thinking of all the things that I like, I can put into jazz music, rather than just saying, oh, it's this one thing that I can only represent one way. And there's a freedom in that sort of multifaceted genre.
So if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one dream gig, where would you go? What would you see?
Oh no! I don't like one-off questions. Like one thing, I always like to spread that out because it's just so hard to choose. There is an album called "The State of the Tenor" that was recorded live by Joe Henderson. It's a trio album, and Joe Henderson, I think, always did a great job of balancing his roles as a composer and a saxophonist. Where like he's writing tunes and some of those tunes are like really thought out compositions, but then when he's playing and when he's improvising, it's like a thought out improvisational context. So I always appreciated that cordless trio album, that set of albums, The State of the Tenor Volume 1 and 2. But then also I would really like to go to Copenhagen to hear Dexter Gordon play as an expat. Like I don't know why specifically there. But like there's this album, Our Man in Paris. It was the first album that I transcribed all of the music to. And I don't know, I just have a really big affinity for that time period for him when he was in Europe as an expat.
That's great. I never even thought about that. That would be, because I think there was a level of freedom and relaxation that went into, even him and Ben Webster and all these other cats that were fleeing the racism and getting into a better place there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, but you run the show, and even your students, but you're in control. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
What I really hope I come off as to other people, I don't know, when I think of myself as a giant nerd just trying his best to do whatever he wants. But like what I hope comes off to other people when they're either thinking about me as a musician or as a teacher or as a friend is that I am an open person that accepts a lot of different thoughts and ideas and sounds into the same space that I would also like to put my thoughts, ideas, and sounds into. I mean, really, that's the whole impetus for me. If I can exist with other people and do an activity that we both enjoy at the same time and learn more about each other while we're doing that, that to me is like the highest form of communication, where like you're creating, you're communicating, and you're learning all at the same time, whether that's like jazz music or that's reading books together and talking about those books or playing a strategy board game or discussing what you think about superheroes. That to me, it's all like the same end goal.
So any shows coming up, anything to promote the album? What's going on with you here in the warm-up?
Yeah, so we're doing something called a double live tour. I'm waiting to talk about it once Elemental Live comes out, because Elemental Live, essentially to me, in my mind, is kind of like a live re-release of a studio album, and then Live at Radio Artifact is like new arrangements. So we have a double live tour that's going to span from June to August for right now. From June to September for right now. It's upwards of 20 dates, but I still am waiting to get some confirmations. So the show's in Cincinnati, Ohio, Pittsburgh, PA. I'm hopefully going to be in the UK and Paris for a second. So in London, Birmingham, UK, and then Paris, France for a second. Philadelphia, the Eastern Shore of Maryland and Delaware, Baltimore, Richmond, North Carolina, Morgantown, Durham, North Carolina, Morgantown, West Virginia, Denver, Colorado. I'm waiting on a Nashville thing. It's there's a lot of traveling coming up this summer, because since I teach during the year, it's hard to get places. So when summer comes, I'm like, let's book as many gigs as possible.
Right on, man. Hey, if anyone wants to pick up the new album or anything about your world, previous material, where's the best place for them to go?
Oh, yeah, the best place to go would be my website, stephenpharvey.com. If you forget the P, it redirects to a dude in Scotland. He's very nice and sends me all the things that accidentally go to him anyways. But Stephen P. Harvey is my website. You can find more information about me and my music, upcoming dates, or if you follow me on social media, look up Stephen Philip Harvey on Facebook or Stephen P. Harvey on Instagram. And I'll be keeping all those up with links and stuff on how to listen or how to buy some of these things.
Excellent. Stephen, thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck with the release and everything else. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate you, Joe. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Ohio, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Stephen for his time, energy, and cool. If you want to hear more Neon Jazz interviews, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends. Hey Jazz fans, Joe Domino here, the host of the weekly Neon Jazz radio show and regular interview series being produced and distributed from Lee Summit, Missouri. We are quite excited to let you know about the first annual Lee Summit Jazz Fest taking place this summer on June 22nd, 2024 at the Bridge Space located at 210 Southwest Market Street. There will be 8 robust acts, including the Back Alley Brass Band and the great Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra. There will also be art vendors and food trucks to make this a must-attend event. All details can be found at www.bridgespace.us/jazz. We will see you there.
Neon Jazz.
Hey Jazz fans, Joe Domino here, the host of the weekly Neon Jazz radio show and regular interview series being produced and distributed from Lee Summit, Missouri. We are quite excited to let you know about the first annual Lee Summit Jazz Fest taking place this summer on June 22nd, 2024 at the Bridge Space located at 210 Southwest Market Street. There will be 8 robust acts, including the Back Alley Brass Band and the great Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra. There will also be art vendors and food trucks to make this a must-attend event. All details can be found at www.bridgespace.us/jazz. We will see you there.